What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for another episode of Ben Builds with Joe and our Tamiya 1/48 scale Dewoitine D.520. Today we're going to push forward and hopefully finish up the cockpit, get the fuselage put together, and then go ahead and get the fuselage installed onto the wings. So that should be pretty fun. First off, we need to go ahead and finish off some of the installations. A couple of parts I need to go ahead and install. One of those is the instrument panel. Now, I'd originally thought I would take the instrument panel and I would overcoat it with that blue color that I use for the fuselage, the Gunsy blue, and then I would come back with some black and I would pick out each of the individual dials. Then I would dry brush with a pale blue and then maybe dry brush with silver, go in there and add in a couple of extra dials and switches, and then I would punch out the decals for each individual gauge and then go ahead and apply those. Problem is, these decals I hear are pretty crappy, so I don't really want to go ahead and bank on that. Luckily for me, the fuselage is pretty deep and the cockpit itself actually obscures a lot of that instrument panel. So even if I go ahead and do all this work on it, you're not going to see it. So I'm thinking we're going to just try it out. If the decals don't work, doesn't much matter. We're just going to go ahead and do as much as we can and not worry about it because you're not going to see it anyway. One of the other areas we need to go ahead and focus on is this rear decking that comes off right behind the pilot seat. We need to go ahead and figure out A, what color to paint that, B, clean it up a little bit because it's got some rough edges, and then we need to glue it down, and then we can tuck everything into the fuselage. Now, speaking of colors, I'm probably going to use this right here. This is by Vallejo, USAF medium gray. And this gray, I've actually seen it called out in my references as being a great color for the camo and also for this little insert that sits right behind the pilot seat. So that's what we're going to go ahead and use. And for the instrument panel, I'm going to go ahead and use my Gunsy Insignia blue, and then we're going to overcoat that with some flat black and dry brush and see what we can do. Once I go ahead and install that in there, we need to put the seatbelts in there for the pilot as well. And that's going to be a little finicky because they are photo etch. So we're going to have to try to bend those, see what we can do with that. Now, last episode, I went ahead and I painted up the seat and I think it looks pretty good, but I do want to go ahead and do some washes on it. And I think for that case, we're going to go ahead and bring out our Army Painter washes. And I'm probably going to use like a soft tone and maybe the dark tone. I just want to go ahead and tint down that tan color just a little bit, give it some wear and tear, place on the seatbelts, tack those in with some super glue, and then paint the seatbelts, maybe like buff or something. And then we'll overcoat everything with like a dark wash or maybe one of the softer tones. Just want to go ahead and kind of play around with it. And I gotta say, I love these Army Painter washes. They work beautifully. Very easy, very simple cleanup, so I like it. So let's go ahead and jump in here, guys, for our first time lapse. I want to go ahead and get that rear decking all straightened out, work on the instrument panel, get that painted, dry brushed, pick out the gauge details. So this should be fun, guys. Let's do it. All right, everybody, we are back, and I have to tell you that the decals did not work. Off camera, I went ahead and I tried to punch those out, and they absolutely disintegrated the minute they touched water. So that's not really going to work for me. So instead, what we're going to do, we're not going to worry about them too much. We're just going to install that instrument panel, and it's going to be so far tucked back into the fuselage, you're not even going to see it. There's no real point in worrying about it. What I'm going to do here, though, is there's a couple of extra missing details I want to go ahead and add before I go ahead and button up the rest of the fuselage. One of those is this brace that actually sits and attaches to the front of the gun sight. So what I'm doing here is basically just stretching some sprue, and then we're curving it because it is kind of an arch. So I want to go ahead and just heat up this sprue with my candle once I can kind of get that stretched out a little bit. And then once this is kind of set up, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it around this random bottle of Vallejo paint, let it cool, and then I think we'll be ready to go ahead and try to cut off a couple of pieces. I think that's a good idea. Also, don't need the candle, so we'll just blow that out. And let's go ahead and see if we can't get these installed. Now, what I should have done is actually remove the front of the gun sight and just make one arch to replace the front of the gun sight and also these side supports. That's what I should have done. I'm going to go ahead and just try this out. If this doesn't work, we can always maybe rethink it before we go ahead and seal up the fuselage. Just tack them in there with some super glue. And once that is all nicely firmed up, then we can come back and we can paint them with the cockpit color. Also, the very, very front of that gun sight, that also needs to be painted almost like a reddish brown, like a leather color. So we'll do that after the fact. So let's go ahead and just see if we can't tack this one part in with some super glue, use a couple different tweezers, and well, let's just try it out. So I was able to go ahead and get that one tacked into place. So I'm going to go ahead and seal up the fuselage. And luckily for me, this kit is absolutely beautiful in terms of fit. Everything seems to go together extraordinarily well. I haven't found any issues really. We have one little area that I'm a little concerned about, but we'll see when we go ahead and get those wings attached. It's such a refreshing feeling to come into a kit that doesn't fight you at every turn. Some of you might know I'm working on an F9 F8 P Photo Cougar for the Recon Group build. It's a Kitty Hawk kit and it is giving me nothing but trouble. I'm still pushing through though. I want to go ahead and get it all finished up. Still, it's so nice to come into a kit that just goes together with very little effort. I love Tamiya, honestly. They are great kits. Now with the fuselage all nicely tacked into place, let's go ahead and install the other arch. Then we can see how we stand. So I have one last arched piece here that I'm going to go ahead and just tack into place. And then once this is in there, we're going to come back and like I mentioned before, we're going to paint that with our insignia blue. One thing I do want to go ahead and try to do is actually bevel the edges so it matches the curvature of the side of the fuselage. So let's go ahead and just drop this last piece in, and then I'm going to throw on the wings and we're going to see how those fit. Hopefully they drop into place without any issue whatsoever. Now off camera, I went ahead and dropped in those wings and we had a little gap right at the end there, but otherwise, man, it went on beautifully. I also put on that front nose insert and that also fits beautifully. Now the cockpit is more or less together. It's done. I'm happy with it. We have the flaps to go ahead and put on, the nose cap to install, rear tail surfaces, as well as the radiator. Now I've actually not installed the radiator just yet. I have a gap right here where the fuselage and the wing meet, and I had to go ahead and put in some styrene strips to go ahead and get that to line up. I want to give myself plenty of area to sand so I can shave that down and get that seam looking good. Now on the top side of the wing, right there where the fuselage meets those wings, man, there is no gap whatsoever. So I think what we're going to go ahead and do is let everything kind of cure and dry. We'll be back and, well, we'll just push on, see what we can do. Make sure to go check out Joe's channel. I know he's pushing a little bit faster on his 520, but until our next episode, everybody, you guys know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we'll see you back here on episode number 6 for Ben Builds with Joe and the Tamiya D520. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.